Let us know where you're watching from today, as we share a story that reminds us how a simple request can lead to an extraordinary moment of human connection. On what seemed like an ordinary morning in Beverly Hills, a homeless man named Grant Holloway stood outside his usual spot near an upscale coffee shop, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The morning had started like any other for Grant, who had been living on the streets since losing his job as a mechanical engineer 2 years ago. He'd found his spot early, before the morning rush began, carrying everything he owned in a worn backpack that still bore the logo of his former company. The coffee shop's owner, Heath Montgomery, had always been kind enough to let him stay nearby, occasionally bringing out leftover pastries and coffee. Local residents had grown accustomed to Grant's presence. His polite demeanor and quiet dignity set him apart from others in his situation. Isaiah Brooks, who managed the nearby bookstore, often noticed how Grant would pick up trash around his area, maintaining a sense of pride despite his circumstances. Jack Penrose, the morning traffic officer, had even started greeting him by name during his daily rounds. The transformation of Grant's life from success to struggle hadn't been dramatic, just a series of setbacks that had snowballed beyond his control. Keaton Wells, a social worker who occasionally checked on him, knew his story: a company downsizing, a medical emergency that drained his savings, and a housing market that offered no mercy. Yet through it all, Grant had maintained his gentle spirit and unfailing politeness. That morning, Lachlan Drew, a regular at the coffee shop, had noticed something different about Grant. Usually stoic and reserved, today he seemed particularly worn down. The previous night's unexpected rain had soaked through his cardboard sleeping mat, and the chill had settled deep in his bones. Still, he maintained his dignified posture, never aggressive in his requests for help. Marcus Ellery, another homeless man who sometimes shared the area, had warned Grant about being too selective in whom he approached for help. But Grant had his principles. He never wanted to make anyone feel uncomfortable or pressured. He believed that maintaining dignity was as important as receiving help. The morning crowd began to build as Noah Sinclair, the coffee shop's barista, prepared for the rush of customers. Regular patrons like Orion West, a local real estate agent, and Preston Gray, an advertising executive, hurried past with barely a glance in Grant's direction. This was the rhythm of the street, the housed and the homeless existing in parallel but separate worlds. But then something changed. Through the growing crowd, Grant spotted a familiar face: Harrison Ford, walking alone toward the coffee shop. The actor moved with his characteristic casual confidence, dressed simply in jeans and a leather jacket, seemingly lost in thought as he approached. Quinton Shaw, a young entrepreneur who frequently observed the street scene while working on his laptop at the coffee shop's window seat, watched with interest as Grant straightened his posture and smoothed his weathered coat. There was something different about how the homeless man prepared to approach the actor, a mix of respect and quiet determination. Rowan Blackwell, the coffee shop's morning regular who prided himself on knowing all the local stories, had often heard Grant speak of his childhood love of movies, particularly the Indiana Jones series. Now, watching the homeless man gather his courage, Rowan sensed something significant was about to unfold. Seth Brantley, delivering the morning newspapers, paused his rounds to watch as Grant took a deep breath and stepped slightly forward from his usual spot. The homeless man's approach was careful, measured, maintaining a respectful distance as Harrison Ford drew nearer. The moment of contact approached as Tate Winslow, the coffee shop's security guard, observed with professional interest. He had seen countless interactions between the homeless and passers-by, but something about this one felt different. Perhaps it was the unusual hesitation in Grant's usually confident demeanor. Upton Reese, filming a commercial in a nearby storefront, couldn't help but turn his camera slightly to capture what was about to happen. The scene composed itself naturally: the famous actor, the humble homeless man, the bustling street suddenly feeling like a stage for something unexpected. Vaughn Mercer, who had been offering Grant odd jobs around his antique store, watched with concern, hoping this interaction wouldn't lead to any trouble. He had grown protective of Grant, recognizing in him a fundamental decency that circumstances hadn't managed to dim. As Harrison Ford came within speaking distance, Wyatt Callahan, the coffee shop's morning chef, peered through the window, curious to see how the actor would respond to being approached on the street. Ford's reputation for privacy was well known, making this moment particularly tense. Zeke Hamilton, a local journalist grabbing his morning coffee, instinctively reached for his phone, sensing a story might be unfolding. But he hesitated, realizing that sometimes the most meaningful moments deserve to unfold without documentation. The street seemed to hold its breath as Grant finally spoke, his voice carrying the same quiet dignity that characterized everything about him. "Excuse me, Mr. Ford," he began, "could you spare $1?" The simplicity of the request belied the courage it had taken to make it. Jonas Crow, a meditation teacher heading to his morning class, stopped to witness what happened next. Harrison Ford had paused, turning to look directly at Grant with an expression that nobody present would ever forget. Have you ever witnessed a moment when the usual barriers between people suddenly disappeared? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. What happened next would remind everyone who witnessed it about the power of human connection. Harrison Ford's response to Grant's simple request would become the talk of Beverly Hills for months to come. As the actor turned to face the homeless man, Easton Hale, about to open his luxury car dealership across the street, expected the usual celebrity brush-off. Instead, what happened next left everyone who witnessed it speechless. Ford's eyes met Grant's with unexpected warmth, and instead of reaching for his wallet, he asked a question that caught everyone off guard. "When was the last time you had a real breakfast?" The simple query, delivered in Ford's signature gruff but gentle tone, carried genuine interest rather than condescension. Abigail Monroe, setting up the morning pastry display at the coffee shop window, watched as Grant straightened slightly, maintaining his dignity as he answered honestly about the challenges of finding regular meals. His response, delivered with the same quiet grace that characterized all his interactions, seemed to strike a chord with the actor. Beatrice Sloan, a regular morning customer who had often wondered about Grant's story, observed how Ford's body language changed. The actor's usual hurried stride had relaxed into something more present and engaged, his attention fully focused on the man before him. The morning crowd began to slow and gather, though maintaining a respectful distance. Camilla Rhodes, heading to her nearby gallery, found herself pausing to witness this unusual interaction between a Hollywood legend and a man society had forgotten. The contrast between them was striking, yet something about their conversation seemed to bridge all visible differences. Daphne Blair, who worked at the local charity center, recognized Grant from his occasional visits seeking assistance. She watched in amazement as Harrison Ford gestured toward the coffee shop door, inviting Grant to join him for breakfast. The invitation was offered not as charity, but as one would ask a friend to share a meal. Inside the coffee shop, Elodie Hart quickly cleared her favorite window table, sensing it might be needed. The other patrons tried to appear nonchalant as Harrison Ford held the door open for Grant, treating him with a respect that many had forgotten to show to those living on the streets. Freya Lowell, the coffee shop's owner, approached their table with professional composure, though her hands trembled slightly as she handed them menus. Ford's request was simple: please bring us whatever he would like to order. The words were spoken quietly but carried enough authority to silence the whispers that had begun around them. As Grant hesitantly studied the menu, Georgia Wynn, a social media influencer who had been about to snap a photo, slowly lowered her phone. Something about the dignity of the moment made her realize that some interactions deserve to remain private, uncaptured by cameras or hashtags. Harper Ellis, working on her novel at a corner table, couldn't help but observe as Ford engaged Grant in genuine conversation. The actor listened intently as Grant shared pieces of his story, his engineering background, the series of setbacks that had led him to the streets, and his unwavering belief that things could still change. The breakfast stretched beyond a simple meal. Isla Montgomery, who conducted business meetings at the coffee shop every morning, noticed how Ford occasionally made notes on a napkin as Grant spoke about his experiences with local shelters and the challenges of finding employment without a permanent address. The conversation deepened as Josie Vance, serving their second round of coffee, overheard discussions of job opportunities and potential solutions. Ford's questions were practical and specific, focused not on temporary help but on sustainable change. His interests seemed to extend beyond this single interaction to understanding the broader challenges faced by those living on the streets. Kaya Whitmore, a local news reporter grabbing her morning coffee, recognized that she was witnessing something newsworthy, yet held back from reporting. Some stories, she realized, deserve to unfold naturally, their impact measured not in headlines but in the quiet ripples of change they create. As the morning progressed, Lillian Hale noticed Ford making several phone calls between bites of breakfast, his voice carrying the same intensity he brought to his film roles. Each call seemed to open new possibilities, contacts in job placement, housing assistance, and support services that could help not just Grant, but others in similar situations. Maisie James, who coordinated veteran services in the area, was surprised to receive one of those calls. Ford had learned that Grant was a veteran and was already working to connect him with resources he hadn't known were available. The actor's influence was opening doors that had previously seemed firmly closed. The impact of their conversation began to spread beyond their table. Nora Lennox, who managed a nearby apartment complex, found herself reconsidering her usual rejection of housing applications from those with gaps in their rental history. Watching Ford treat Grant with such respect made her question her own preconceptions. Odessa Blake, a skill development coordinator at the local community college, listened intently as Ford discussed educational opportunities with Grant. The actor's practical approach to problem-solving, combined with his willingness to use his influence constructively, was creating a blueprint for genuine assistance rather than temporary aid. As their breakfast meeting extended into the late morning, Penelope Shaw, a corporate recruiter having coffee with clients, found herself impressed by Grant's articulate descriptions of his engineering experience. The dignity Ford's attention had restored to him seemed to bring his professional capabilities back into focus. The morning's events took another turn when Quinn Avery, a tech startup founder, overheard Grant's background in mechanical engineering. What started as a simple request for $1 was evolving into a network of opportunities and connections that could change not just one life, but potentially many. Have you ever witnessed how treating someone with dignity can reveal the true potential that circumstances have hidden? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. Harrison Ford's response to a simple request was about to transform into something even more extraordinary. As the morning turned to afternoon, the impact of Harrison Ford's impromptu breakfast with Grant began to spread throughout Beverly Hills and beyond. Romalie Hayes, who directed a local homeless outreach program, watched in amazement as her phone lit up with calls from people who had witnessed the interaction and now wanted to get involved in making a difference. The coffee shop had become an informal command center. Serena Banks, a corporate attorney having lunch at a nearby table, found herself drafted into helping Grant navigate the paperwork. For job applications and housing assistance. Ford's presence had created an atmosphere where professionals naturally offered their expertise to help. Tamsin Clark, who managed a transitional housing program, arrived with a stack of documents after receiving Ford's call. The actor wasn't just offering temporary solutions, he was working to create a sustainable path forward. His practical approach focused on removing the barriers that kept people trapped in homelessness. Ursula Merrick, coordinating with veteran services, discovered that Grant qualified for several assistance programs he hadn't known existed. Ford's involvement had cut through red tape that might have taken months to navigate otherwise, expediting access to crucial resources. The transformation in Grant was already visible. Valerie Holt, a regular customer who had often given him coffee, noticed how his posture had changed. The simple act of being treated with dignity had rekindled something that circumstances had dimmed but never extinguished. Winnie Drake, who taught computer skills at the local library, offered to help Grant update his resume and create a professional email address. What started as a simple breakfast was evolving into a community-wide effort to help one man rebuild his life. Ford's influence continued to expand the circle of support. Zena Blair, who owned a nearby menswear shop, arrived with a selection of interview-appropriate clothing. The actor had quietly arranged to cover the cost, ensuring Grant would have everything he needed to make a strong impression in job interviews. Zinnia Carr, running an employment agency specializing in technical professionals, recognized Grant's potential immediately. His engineering background, combined with Ford's endorsement, opened doors that had previously seemed permanently closed. The actor's approach to helping went beyond immediate needs. Annalise Frost, a financial advisor, was brought in to help Grant create a sustainable budget and savings plan. Ford understood that true change required not just immediate assistance but long-term financial stability. Bridget Monroe, who managed several local apartment complexes, worked with Ford to arrange temporary housing while more permanent solutions were developed. The actor's involvement had transformed the usual skepticism about renting to someone with a gap in their housing history. The impact spread to other businesses in the area. Celeste Hayes, owning a small engineering consultancy, expressed interest in Grant's technical expertise. The breakfast meeting had revealed not just a person in need, but a skilled professional who had fallen on hard times. Delilah Green, coordinating with local social services, found herself rethinking how her organization approached assistance. Ford's personalized, dignity-first approach demonstrated how meaningful change could happen when bureaucratic barriers were removed. Throughout the afternoon, Estelle Vaughn documented the developing support network. What had begun as a simple request for $1 had evolved into a model for how communities could effectively help those struggling with homelessness. Fiona Hollis, representing a veterans support organization, arrived with information about additional resources. Ford's involvement had highlighted how many services were available but often difficult to access without advocacy and support. The story began attracting attention from others in similar situations. Giselle Brooks, who worked with a homeless advocacy group, noted how the incident was changing perceptions about homelessness in the community. Grant's story highlighted how many skilled professionals were just one setback away from losing everything. Hattie Quinn, managing a job training program, worked with Ford to develop a plan for helping Grant refresh his technical certifications. The actor's practical approach focused on removing specific obstacles that kept people from returning to their professions. The afternoon brought unexpected opportunities. Imogen Lee, a tech company recruiter, expressed interest in Grant's engineering background. His story resonated with the industry's interest in second chances and non-traditional career paths. Ford's influence extended to changing institutional policies. Juliette Vance, serving on the city council, began discussing how to streamline access to services for others in similar situations. Grant's case was becoming a template for systemic change. The impact on the community's perspective was profound. Kendall Rivers, who had often passed Grant without a second glance, found herself reconsidering her assumptions about homelessness. Ford's treatment of Grant as a peer rather than a charity case had shifted many people's viewpoints. As evening approached, Lilith Monroe, from the local news station, approached Ford for comment. The actor declined to be interviewed, insisting that the focus remain on the larger issues of homelessness and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. The day's events had created a blueprint for change. Magnolia Trent, studying urban social issues, observed how Ford's approach combined immediate assistance with long-term solutions. The actor understood that sustainable change required addressing both urgent needs and underlying causes. Have you ever seen how one person's compassionate response can inspire an entire community to action? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. Harrison Ford's Breakfast with Grant was about to create changes that would extend far beyond that morning's chance encounter. 6 months after Harrison Ford sat down for breakfast with a homeless man who asked for $1, the impact of that morning continued to create waves of positive change throughout Beverly Hills and beyond. Noel Sterling, who had been documenting the transformation, watched as Grant walked confidently into his new office at a local engineering firm, his journey from the street to success becoming an inspiration for others facing similar challenges. The coffee shop where it all began had transformed as well. Odessa Wynn, who still managed the morning shift, had established a Pay It Forward program that provided meals and job search support for others struggling with homelessness. Ford's example had sparked a movement of practical compassion that continued to grow. Grant's story had become a catalyst for change in how the community approached homelessness. Phoebe Clark, directing a newly established transition program, used the model that emerged from Ford's intervention, combining immediate assistance with long-term support and dignity-first treatment to help others rebuild their lives. Rosalind Hale, who coordinated the local homeless services network, reported that the impact extended far beyond one success story. The barriers that Ford had helped break down, bureaucratic obstacles, prejudices about hiring those with gaps in employment, resistance to housing assistance, remained lowered, creating paths for others to follow. The actors' continued involvement, though quiet and behind the scenes, ensured the momentum didn't fade. Saffron Carrick, managing a new job training initiative, worked with Ford to develop programs that connected people's existing skills with employment opportunities. The focus remained on recognizing and restoring professional dignity. Thea Whitaker, researching the program's success rate, found that the personalized approach inspired by Ford's intervention had led to significantly better outcomes than traditional assistance methods. The key was treating each person as an individual with unique skills and potential, rather than applying one-size-fits-all solutions. Una Maddox observed how Grant had become not just a success story, but an active participant in helping others. His experience as both an engineer and someone who had overcome homelessness provided unique insights into creating effective support systems. His weekly mentoring sessions at the local shelter inspired others to believe in the possibility of change. The impact reached beyond immediate assistance to affect policy changes. Vera Whitman, serving on the city's Housing Commission, helped implement new guidelines that made it easier for people to maintain housing during temporary financial setbacks. Prevention, they had learned, was as important as cure. Willa Morgan, reporting for a national news magazine, found that other cities had begun studying and implementing similar programs. The model that emerged from Ford's spontaneous act of kindness, combining celebrity influence, community resources, and dignity-based assistance, was being replicated across the country. The transformation of the original coffee shop continued. Zandra Lowe, who had witnessed the first interaction, now coordinated a program that provided job training in barista skills and food service management. The shop had become both a business and a bridge to better opportunities. Yvette Moore, managing the expanded community resource center that grew from Ford's initiative, worked to maintain the personal touch that had made the original interventions so successful. Each person who came through their doors was treated with the same respect and individual attention that Ford had shown Grant. The professional community remained engaged. Zoe Vaughn, leading a coalition of local businesses, had established a network of employers willing to look beyond gaps in employment history to see potential in job candidates. Grant's success had demonstrated how valuable overlooked talent could be. Ford's own approach to helping had evolved. While maintaining his characteristic privacy, he worked with Emmett Vaughn to establish a foundation that provided targeted assistance to homeless professionals. The focus remained on restoring dignity through meaningful work and sustainable support. The impact on Grant himself continued to deepen. Now financially stable and professionally active, he had begun developing engineering solutions for homeless shelters, applying his technical skills to improve conditions for those still struggling. His unique perspective bridged the gap between professional expertise and personal experience. The community's perception of homelessness had fundamentally shifted. What many had once seen as an intractable problem now appeared as a solvable challenge, given the right combination of resources, respect, and practical support. Ford's example had shown how individual action could catalyze systemic change. 6 months later, the original breakfast meeting remained a topic of discussion, not for its celebrity element, but for how it demonstrated the power of treating people with dignity. The simple act of sitting down to share a meal as equals had created a template for meaningful intervention. The ripple effects continued to spread. Local businesses, inspired by Ford's example, had developed their own initiatives to support community members in need. The focus shifted from temporary charity to sustainable solutions that recognized and restored human dignity. Grant's engineering firm had become a model for inclusive hiring practices. Their success with him led them to actively recruit other professionals who had experienced homelessness, recognizing that circumstances rather than capability often determine someone's situation. The lasting impact showed most clearly in the changed attitudes of the community. Where people had once passed by without seeing, they now stopped to engage. The barrier between us and them had begun to dissolve, replaced by a recognition of shared humanity and potential. Have you ever witnessed how one act of genuine kindness can transform not just a life, but an entire community's approach to helping others? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. Sometimes the greatest changes begin with the smallest gestures, like taking time to share breakfast with someone who simply asked for $1.